4-1, variance passes.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your assistance. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to call for a motion to adjourn Board of Adjustment and reconvene as Planning and Zoning.
Toad second.
Okay, motion a second. All in favor? Opposed? All right. Sorry for you having to wait so long. The things you learned tonight, right? But we do want to discuss your concerns on your property. So, yeah. We've spent a lot of time on signs. Okay, so, where are we at on this? We're trying to find some common ground,
Yep.
correct?
So, number one question is the existing billboard on a property rendering eliminating the property to have any other freestanding signage. Is that an issue you wish to address? If so, how? One proposal was from the development committee that met yesterday, and Steve Van Busker also talked about that before, was is there a way to somehow exempt that existing commercial off-premise sign from counting against the numbers? It would be allowed to stay. If it went away, it would still be subject to nonconformity. It just wouldn't count against your one cap or your size cap. That was their proposal, but there are other ways to address it, whether you wanted to, across the board, just allow more signage, whether an additional sign or larger, or however you wanted to do it. If you think it's an issue, what is the proposed solution to the issue?
What page is that in the packet? You had given us some ideas. Is that in the packet?
So the packet has them broadly. I sent one out later in the day that was a summary of the development committee. That was not in the packet because the packet has to come out 24 hours ahead of time.
But where would that
Page
be?
53.
So that the example I mentioned is somewhat akin to 5 on 54. It just depends on if you want to do that in the sign regulations itself, as some exception in chapter 1517, the non-conforming uses. So there are a couple of ways to do it if you're interested in that option. There's several options, whether no changes are warranted and you're fine with how it is. If you wanted to do offset language by conditional use permit to increase size, or however you wanted to do it, make signage based on the size of the lot or the principal building like we did in institutional, if you wanted to increase or I guess conceptually decrease signage that way. There was a Supreme Court case in 2022 that walked back part of the holding of the Reed decision. To some degree, it seems like they had a result and needed to come up with logic to get there, but that's an argument people make. It basically reestablished the on-premise, off-premise distinction for commercial signs. So it kept everything that you can't look at the concept, you can't look at the content of the sign, but for some reason, on and off-premise is not looking at the content of the sign. So they saw it more as time, place, and manner, but I still have questions, but that is what the law is. So there is that distinction now, and we talked about overlays. There's the non-conforming use language, there's variances, there's a lot of ways to do it. So if you all see it as a problem, we are open to your thoughts on how we should address it.
I appreciate the information you presented, Patrick, and that's very helpful. I think my opinion is I think by and large I'm not interested in changing our sign regulations. By and large, we have obviously something we just discussed about potentially height in an overlay district, but as far as like increasing generally the amount of signage available, I don't think I'm personally interested in that, but I do recognize that we have a couple of situations we've been learned about with these, I guess, billboards, and so I this item number 5 on page 54 I'm personally in favor of that if there's a way we can write basically an exception to account for these things that exist that we're now aware of, and not businesses that are now trying to develop on those properties based on these pre-existing signs. I'm also, I think, as I said earlier, interested in maybe a condition that would say the existing sign and the existing lease somehow, so that it wouldn't be renewed. And if that 15-17 chapter is the cleanest way to do that, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I kind of tend to agree. The number 5, it talks about recently annexed. Would we be able to write it in a way that Split Rock property would be able to be included in that?
So we would just take out the specificity of the recently annexed. It would be off-premise, commercial signage, freestanding signage, pre-existing the date of adoption of the ordinance.
Future.
The reason why you'd want to be so specific with the off-premise, commercial, freestanding signage, because you do have property across the road with McDonald's and Circle K that technically would be a pre-existing freestanding sign. So would you want that to be exempt and then add another one? So it would have to take some specificity.
So, I'll just make some comments, because I was on board when we did this last major renovation of signage. And at that time, Patrick was a consultant to the city. So just, if you look at a lot of the other ordinances, they have what's called off-premise signs, on-premise and off-premise signs. And we went away from that because we couldn't regulate content. And so, at the last meeting, we had a person come in and he said, well, yeah, but you guys don't, your billboards thing, well, how the other towns are addressing that is they call it off-premise signage. And we elected, because we can't control content, was to get rid of on and off-premise signage. And signage was all encompassing, whether you wanted to advertise for yourself or you wanted to advertise for somebody else, or whatever you wanted to do. But we elected at that time that each property gets X amount of signage. Now, whether you want to do that for yourself or you want to do that for somebody else, that's entirely up to you. So that's kind of the history of where we're at, where we are now. I do have a question for Mr. Kane. Do you happen to know when the lease runs out on that current billboard on your property?
I do not know. I guess I never reviewed it before I came tonight.
Okay.
I am not 100%. I know it's a longer lease.
Is your goal to renew that lease, or is your goal to terminate that lease?
If it's going to be a problem going forward, probably not.
Okay.
Truthfully, if I would have known this would have been a problem how many years back, I would have never done it, because the amount of money I get from the thing compared to the problem I'm facing today, it's really not worth it, because it doesn't even pay a third of my real estate taxes. So, yeah. So as far as I'm concerned, if it would help in this discussion, I don't need to do that. If that would help, I guess.
Because again, the history on this, when we addressed this, we were concerned about the density of signage. And so that's kind of where we came at, where we're at now. So I just wanted to share that with the rest of you. So, because if we allowed every business on Split Rock or every business on Holly to have 200 feet of signage and a billboard, where would we be? So.
Pretty ugly road.
Yeah, what good are the signs when they're that dense? Who can read them? All those signs as you drive. Exactly, yeah.
So what I hear us saying is that we don't want new billboards, but because existing billboards are here, and we want to give the property owner the option of having some signage, we don't count the existing billboards toward the signage quota? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, I think the way we would want to write this, from my gathering, is that we don't eliminate anything that's currently there, really. I mean, it would allow them to put pylon sign back up, but it was there previously. So we're not really adding anything, and eventually, as those billboard sign leases expire, those would go away. So it would be kind of a long-term thing cleaning up, but we're not adding any signage, is kind of what I'm hearing.
Or in the case of another property that was discussed west of Brandon, it would allow them to just abide by the current business signage and not lose that ability because of the existing billboard.
What, how would staff monitor? You have to, the staff would have to know when the lease of that billboard is up and then
Yes, that would be
contact
difficult.
whoever owns the land at that, you know?
If it's a 20-year lease,
Yeah, how do you keep
chances
track
are
of that?
not many current staff will be here in 20 years.
Yeah,
I think if it's a condition of a variance, you put that date on the variance.
but who's
So if-
gonna keep track of it?
So if we were to say, yeah, we'll allow you to put up an on-premise sign or whatever whatever you call it. If somebody wants to put up 200 square feet of signage, but on the condition that you don't renew your current sign, you don't renew your billboard sign, I mean, we would know the date and that would go right in.
Well, I seem to remember from the last meeting, and I could be wrong, that the lease on your billboard is still good for like 10 more years. All of us in this room could be somebody else by 10 years, and how would they know that they should, you know, you as property owner, or maybe you would sell it before then, the property owner would have to be on their honor to do that and not renew it. Or if somebody in the city would happen to think, oh, you know, there was that thing, and go talk to the owner of the property, oh, I completely forgot that, just renewed it for another 10 years. I mean, who's responsible for keeping track of it and enforcing it, is my question.
Is that feasible from your end? Because I'm assuming if that's the condition of it, then there would be a penalty if they don't comply, right?
It would be generally the penalty laid out in the ordinance. They would be fined $500 a day that the sign stays up. The other side to that is, say they renew the lease when they shouldn't have, and in the meantime they have put up another freestanding sign. Now that sign is just non-conforming. There's no way we could go back and then make them take that down. They would just have a loophole and not have two signs. So it would take some tracking. I don't know how exactly we would do it. We would need some kind of more advanced filing system than we have now that would carry over to whoever is here in that period of time.
And I understand that these companies have leases that automatically renew and things like that, but if the city has an ordinance that's against that, would there be a way that they would be forced to comply?
The way we can force them to comply would probably be to fine them every day.
I'm just wondering if it
Yeah.
can go, if
We
it
could probably
automatically
get some
renews.
kind of injunction if the city attorney was
Yeah.
willing to
So
do
I
it.
mean, I think there's a way to do that. I think it would be the responsibility of the owner and the company that has the lease. And if they fall out of their agreement, there's penalties, and that's what.
Paul puts a reminder on his Outlook calendar 10 years from now.
That's what you'd have to do. Or in the olden days, you have little like recipe cards in a box and with a note, and you look through them every month. And
So one option, potentially a future discussion item coming down the road preview, is there are certain non-conforming uses that the rule is you can't have them destroyed or taken down more than 51% of the value. right now, current practice is if there is a non-conforming deck and they want to replace it, we generally let them, they just have to go through a whole shenanigans building permit process. Of course, you get potentially 3 building permits to do it, where, someone just rips off the deck and you put it back. So, how do we want to address that in the future is a future discussion item. But conceptually, eventually, something will happen to that sign where they have to repair more than 51% of it. Would that be a situation then where they just can't put it back up and that's a fight between the landowner and the sign company? Or so that's an issue. You generally don't just take down 51% of the sign and replace it. It's a whole thing. Like you don't take down 49% of the deck and then 1% or 2% and then the remainder to solve the non-conformity issue. So we're trying to figure that out.
Would we get into a legal battle if one of these sign companies had a signed contract that says, I have the right to advertise here on this sign? Okay. And we agree that's a non-conforming use because of what the next owner puts up on that property. Tornado comes and blows the sign over. They come to build their sign back, and we say, no, you can't, because you're a non-conforming use. And they're going to say, doesn't matter. We were here first. They are the non-conforming use, not us. So I don't know if we would want to get ourselves or the landowner into a pickle on a situation like that. I mean, you're an attorney, but I would think attorneys could have fun with that one.
Would you, maybe I'm thinking about this wrong, but I was thinking that a provision like this exception would help that. It would, in fact, sort of solidify these existing ones during the term of the existing lease, but after that point, make them.
If it was destroyed during that period of lease, would we want them to put it back up? So long as the lease is active.
Would we have any ability to tell them no? If they have a lease,
Is that a fight you want to have?
that they can do that.
Yeah, I do. I kind of agree. This could be a way that solves that issue because it's going to be. They're not going to just be like, oh, okay, that's fine. I think that could be a battle that isn't going to do anyone any good. And Brian's right. Who's the non-conforming? If they were there first, but at the same time, I guess if it's on a property, if something's non-conforming and you remove part of it, so I'm not sure that would be necessarily.
But wouldn't my old pylon sign that kind of got half ripped down, that was their first, to be truthful.
Is it still there? Is half of it still there?
Yeah.
Is over half of it there?
The sign face was taken down. The sign face is the sign. The pole,
The face is gone, but the pole, the concrete and everything is still there.
without a sign face, a pole is a pole.
But if you can't build it because it's non-conforming, if half of it's still there,
But is the pole part of the sign, or is only the face of the sign part of the sign?
oh, what's a deck? Is it the platform or the poles? I mean, so I don't know.
Our size of signs talks about the face, not the pole, so I think, to me, the size of the,
I don't know, it's the
but,
structure, so
yeah.
I don't know.
that's a whole different discussion.
If you were gonna split hairs, if you had lawyers, that could be something they would split hairs on and talk about. Of these, possible options you have here, I also like number 5 the best of those. And nothing even better than that has occurred to me. So that's where I would start, would be with that one. That's my preference.
So we will work on some language kind of in the sphere of number 5 and see what we can come up with to discuss on the 20th.
Can we just put it as an agenda item rather than discussion so that we can move along?
It would either be a discussion item or a public hearing.
More of an outline of what we are choosing from.
It would be a more
Tonight.
advanced form of the discussion.
Yeah,
it would be an
like
actual draft and not just a hypothetical.
Yeah, it would be
Conversation.
a first draft of an ordinance.
I will
Isn't
say
it?
that
Yeah,
on my end of this, time is kind of the essence because like this is holding up my building project no different than what you guys just voted on. So like if we're gonna push this out 3 months, that's gonna be a real big problem. We're gonna miss our window of opportunity with building, truthfully.
Well, if we have draft language next meeting, then it can go to the public a month from now.
Correct.
And then it can be at city council.
Likely be the second week in April, just to the way the calendar falls. With you get it to the paper on the Friday, publish the Wednesday, then 10 days. It'd probably be the second meeting in April for the public hearing, without digging through the calendar. That's roughly it.
So it'd be in front of city council then, 1st of May.
So if it was April 17th, the third Monday in April is the 21st. So that is advantageous there. It would go to the city council on the 21st for public hearing. Second reading would be May 5th. Then published in the newspaper on the 9th. You'd show up in the newspaper on the 14th. Then you would add 20 days. So you're probably probably June 2nd. If things went expediently.
So
The
what
other
was
option-
date, June what?
June 2nd, if everything went as quick as possible.
So the other option is you come to us for a variance, and your hardship is the existing condition, which is a signage lease, which in my mind is no different than an existing easement that's restricting what you can do on your property. This just happens to be a signage easement. And since there's a signage easement on your property, that gives you as a landowner absolutely no option for any signage.
Right, and
I mean, that to me is a cut and dried case of hardship.
okay.
You don't have to pay the money for a variance application.
Fair enough.
I don't know how much faster a variance would be than this. Would it be faster? I don't know.
Well, variance is one and done here. I don't think that.
A variance would be conceptually April 17th as well.
Is that anything we could vote on tonight?
Gotta be on the agenda, sorry.
You know,
And there has
just,
to be notice.
yeah. And just to note, you don't need a sign permit to have your building permit, so you could start construction
Sure.
and then let the process go through, assuming you're not putting up your sign first.
Right, and we would, I mean, I would just, the only thing that this might hold up is the contract.
Your risk is that the process goes as you anticipate. I mean, whatever percentage that it wouldn't, if it's a 1% chance or whatever, is your risk that it gets referred or enough say no variance, we don't want to change it. It's your risk.
I would look for advice. What do you guys feel is the best way to get past this? Because I really don't know. Me and Tammy had a short discussion on it, but I'm looking for any advice, to be truthful.
Without it being a public hearing, we can't really say if a variance will go or not, and we don't really have the language to make any kind of a motion on a change to the ordinance, so you kinda have to go with, I don't know what you have to go with, but what your best argument is, if you, is it, you said something about same date for a variance versus a potentially for an ordinance, or?
So, your public hearing for planning and zoning for the draft ordinance would likely be the same day as what the variance would be. After the planning and zoning public hearing on an amendment would be city council 2 readings and a referendum period, so. Likely April 17th if it's filed decently soon. And you'll wanna call up and talk to Melissa about that.
A variance you're talking.
If that's the route you're interested in going, and you'll want to review the standard and whether you feel it applies. And as you heard earlier, it relates to something about the property itself, not that I want a 3rd stall garage because it'd be really cool to have it or stuff like that.
Now, is there an existing business on your property right now? No. It's where
Unfortunately, that was
it's where that fire was, right? So that, okay. And you have come in and asked, which we granted, a rezoning from industrial to commercial, right?
Correct.
And you had a possible tenant in mind at that time?
Yes.
And do you still have that possible tenant, the same one?
This is basically the last little hurdle to get that tenant.
Okay, and at the time, at the meeting of the rezoning, I think Tammy, our engineer, our city engineer, had some concerns about that property and that type of business going into that property. Now, I didn't memorize everything you said, so would you please reiterate, if you still have those same concerns, will you please say them?
So we have actually worked through the whole site plan already. So we have addressed all of those concerns. The last concern is just the sign now.
Oh, okay,
Yep,
so
so
all
we
the
did talk about
concerns
the
you
drain.
had in the past have been figured out?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, that's good to know.
But the fact that the building burned down and
Unfortunately.
the sign got destroyed, they could not put up any building, doesn't matter what it's zoned, whether it's a heavy industrial, light industrial, commercial, anything, they can't put up a freestanding sign. Doesn't matter what it's zoned, because of the billboard.
And not to push, but I'm gonna use my dad for example. When my dad's on vacation, he's driving around in some unknown place, and he sees an ice cream sign. He can't get past it. He's gonna stop there. This is how important it is, in my opinion, because like that business wouldn't have got that had he not, or that had that freestanding sign on the curb.
My only thought was that if you were still thinking of the same possible tenant,
I am.
and if the engineering, or if the site was not appropriate for that
I believe me and Tammy
tenant,
have,
then your timeline wouldn't be so rushed.
right,
And then there might be more time to address it.
100%.
That's what I was thinking. So
You are correct.
Yeah.
And
I'm glad to hear that all
Yes.
yeah.
They're to the part where they could get a building permit tomorrow if they needed to. So this is the last piece.
So yeah, I'm not telling you what to do, but I would agree that a variance looks like it would be quicker for you, and or you could wait for us to get through the ordinance process. But to say which one would work, I can't do that. But you said, why wouldn't walk through the timeline on the variance? Why wouldn't you be able to do that the first meeting in April?
We would have to, well, if they got the application, there's probably enough flexibility still in March to do that, because it wouldn't have the extra draft fee. So we'd have to, or time, so we'd have to look at, the first meeting in April would be the 3rd. So we'd have to count back 10 days and find the closest Wednesday. So if he got it in, probably, we'd have to look at the calendar for sure. So you'd want to talk to Melissa about timing on that. But if you got it to us, probably the 14th for the 19th would still probably give you enough time. But I'm guessing if it was published on the 26th, no. So you'll want to talk to Melissa, but likely you'd probably be able to make it.
The sooner the better.
Yes, the
anyway.
sooner the better. For the 3rd, the sooner the better. You'd want to talk to Melissa.
So tomorrow.
Yes. You'd want to talk to her tomorrow, probably, just to lay out some timelines. Yep. There is a fee. Of course, it's not guaranteed. It would take, as you saw with the earlier sign, it would take 2/3, so it would take 4 out of 6 to say yes.
Yeah, the fee is for the application, not
Yes.
for the,
Yes, it's not a
You do-
guaranteed
you-
result by paying
right,
a fee.
you don't
It's not
buy
pay
a
to play.
variance, you just pay for an application, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Not that
Not
you
that
would,
the fee matters, but you know what it is.
Either 375 or 4.
Thanks for your feedback.
I will not be here at the next meeting. Second meeting in June, I will, or the second meeting in March, I will not.
Yes. So likely the 3rd. The 20th wouldn't work just because we got it to the paper on the 12th. That's not the 10 days.
I mean, God willing, you know, I could be in hospital with a broken leg that day, but you just don't know.
We can wheel you in. We'll wheel you in right in here.
I can do that from, even if I'm on vacation in the Fiji, I could call in for the meeting.
Oh, okay, is that given you enough direction? Okay, thank you. Thanks for your patience. Thank you very much for coming again. Thank you.
We're still gonna continue with this though.
Yes, I imagine so. We'll still continue with the
Because we're
language.
gonna run into it again.
Yeah,
And it would be nice for everyone involved to have a plan so that people aren't losing deals because of.
yeah. And not having to do variances. Okay, residential districts memo.
So the development committee, Rob can correct me if I'm wrong, really didn't have much feedback on this topic. So we had basically asked them, are there any continuous roadblocks that you run into wanting to work on it? Whether it's a house or a townhouse or apartments and they didn't really seem to have any feedback. I know we talked about some terminology and everything we wanted to change, but I'll leave it up to you if you want to talk anything
their
about
most
that at
feedback
8:35 p.m. on a Thursday.
Was signage again, their feedback was.
Based on the time, if
Shocking.
you want to leave this to another meeting, that's fine too.
Anybody have any, like, pressing concerns on this, or can this be deferred?
Yeah, deferred.
Okay.
It's,
Deferred? Hey, it's earlier than last time, cause it's not 9 yet. We're making a little progress. Okay. Anything else? We've got the building permits. If there is nothing else, I will.
Just a comment, so, I don't know if inflation is going up fast, but I know in the past couple of years, we've changed things like, at the request of developers on smaller lots and smaller setbacks to get more, affordable housing in town, but I'm not seeing that being reflected in the building permits. Is that because the inflation is just going up so fast that, what we're seeing in the building permits doesn't include the price of the land?
I think it's interest rates, personally, that's why no one's moving, because the ones we're doing all right now is cash buyers, they're not even using banks, so. We don't even get calls for people that would go through a bank, I guess you could say, we get a few, but they can't afford it when they talk, once we tell them the price, they go, okay.
And so even though we've made all these changes, we're still not accommodating the first-time home buyers and the low-income housing, and because there's still too much demand.
Well, and I
that
don't,
Everybody's still doing the ones that they could be more profitable on, so.
I don't see the lot size being the reason why people are buying a more affordable home. smaller lots, and from what I see, are usually villas, and they're usually more towards empty nesters or something, and they're a lot of times have nicer amenities than a little bit bigger lots that are kind of the first-time home buyer type homes that are cheaper. So a lot of times I see the more affordable homes are a little bit bigger lot because they want a yard for the kids and stuff. The smaller lots, villa lots, tend to be more expensive homes, nicer amenities. They're just on a smaller lot. They have people that don't really want a big yard. They're empty nesters or whatever, and they don't want a lot of maintenance. So I don't see smaller lot equaling more affordable house, I guess.
I'm just, and maybe the lot size isn't it, I'm just hearing a lot from developers and other people about we're not catering to the lower income, the first time buyers and the low income housing. And it might be just the nature of what it is, but I mean, I think the cheapest I've seen on here in the last year is a $250,000 building permit. And that's just the house, that doesn't include the land, so you're north of 300.
Yeah, there's not much for a house.
And you're starting at 450.
Yeah.
What's that?
You're starting at 450 for a 1,500 square foot house.
You know, so I keep hearing it, but I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing the results. So is there something from a zoning standpoint that's causing this, or, you know,
I
or
think
it's
if,
not ownership, you know? I think we're trying to get people to
if
be
we
able to
wanted,
buy their own home.
I think if we wanted to focus on that, we could maybe talk to the development foundation or whatever it's called, and they could purchase some land where there was control over it and talk to some builders and have them specifically build houses to meet that. But
Laverne does something like that, or they did. I don't know what the whole thing was in Laverne, what they did. They had lots and you had, I don't remember what it exactly was, but they were very reasonably priced to get houses in there. But I don't know if there's, I'm assuming there's stipulations of how long they have to live there and stuff like that.
yeah, but as far as lot size goes, I don't see smaller lot equaling more affordable home. Those are usually a little bit nicer amenities, a little bit higher quality than the first time homebuyer house that they want a yard and stuff for the kids. And so I don't see smaller lot. So I'm not sure how we would control that unless we were working with someone that was buying the land and were focusing on that. Because I don't think just controlling the lot size, we'd be able to do that.
Well, that's what, I mean, it was discussed at the meeting, or the development, meeting, that Oakland's all R2, his land to the south, it's all R2. Well, he did that because then he has options, which I get it, but at the same time is I don't want all these developers coming in and wanting everything R2, which we stopped out at River Park, yes, which I'm glad we did, but we just gotta be aware of that. That's how they're thinking now, is because they can sell more. It's just more lots, more money, to a point.
Yeah, I mean, they came in and they said, these are 2 lots so that we can do that, low income housing, but the result I've seen is, like you said, it's so they can cram more in and, maximize their profits a little bit, which, I mean, that's why we're all in business, is to make money, but I think we also need to do whatever we can as a board to make sure that we're not, just looking at Brandon as, middle and upper class, because some businesses may not come here because we don't have a workforce. They might say, if I'm a business that has, that's looking for a lot of low cost labor, they might bypass Brandon and go someplace else. They may go to a rural town like a Howard or a Madison or something like that has low income, workforce available, immediately available.
Is there a way, do developers ever do, I guess, what we did on the house I live in? But there was a federal program, but we had to do all the woodwork in the house ourselves. We had to do all the painting inside and out ourselves. We had to seed the lawn or sod the lawn, whichever our choice, ourselves. And then we didn't have to put in a down payment. So what was it called, Glenn? No, there was a name for
Sweat equity.
sweat equity. Thank you.
People used to do that.
That's not a thing anymore.
People don't want it.
So you can get a cheaper house if you help build it. That's
That all the time, like they'd want to paint their house, which we were fine with, or do whatever, we were fine with whatever they wanted to do. We don't even get asked that anymore. They just want it up as fast as they can and get in.
and the basement had to be unfinished.
Totes so moved.
We are adjourned at 8:44 p.m.